Professor Swaran Singh. So thank you for waiting patiently. Let's look at the summit from India's perspective. How do you think New Delhi is likely to view it, considering that this involves one country, which, as I said, has been, a long-standing friend of India, one with whom we have historical ties. Even in the face of Western pressure and sanctions, India continued to import oil from Russia. Some in the Western media have even accused us of contributing to Moscow's war effort in Ukraine. On the other hand, is a country which is clearly an adversary, with whom we've had very difficult relations that have particularly been strained since 2020. How do you think New Delhi is likely to view the tango, or shall we say this quote unquote no limits partnership between these two countries, a friend and a foe for us?
Thank you, Neha. I think it's very interesting to look at how New Delhi is looking or should be looking at this bonhomie that is happening in Beijing between President Putin and President Xi Jinping. As you said, during the Ukraine crisis of last 2+ years, India has reposed its trust and confidence and showcased that it will continue to have a close relationship with Russia. Among other things, suddenly exponential import of energy has resulted in Russia-India trade going up from $8-9 billion to now $40-45 billion. So yes, India has invested in that sense in showcasing to the West that their pressures will not make India budge, and India will continue to be working very closely with Russia despite what is happening in Ukraine. Of course, many European nations have been beneficiaries of India exporting the same oil after this is being processed in India. But remember, we are repeatedly saying Russia would not like to be the junior partner of China. But that's a reality. Increasingly, the longer the war continues, the more vulnerable President Putin keeps becoming to President Xi Jinping's, benefactor gestures. Simple things. China's economy today is about 11 times that of Russia. And Russia would have never been able to survive Western sanctions minus endorsement and support from China. And we are noticing, as you opened your program, that West is even accusing China today of providing material support to Russian military, not only Russian coffers, but even Russian military in that sense. And this continuous push of President Putin feeling more and more dependent on China makes this equation nothing more than now a subset or a subplot of the larger geopolitical contestation between the United States and China. In fact, the United States is also indicating that they need China's support to put certain restraint on President Putin. European leaders have been much more expressive about it, asking President Xi Jinping to, somehow influence Russia to sort of put an end to it. Of course, we remember Chinese had last year put up a 12-point program for peace. Of course, they did not become acceptable to Western nations because it doesn't start with a precondition of Russian forces withdrawing from all positions in Ukraine in that sense. So that is a non-starter kind of an initiative. But despite that disappointment of the West from that kind of peace initiative from Beijing, even today, Americans and European leaders are indicating that perhaps Xi Jinping could help them in putting an early end to Ukraine war. So fundamentally, that empowers, emboldens Chinese leaders, with which we have had difficult times now for 4 years since Galwan. And therefore, I think the question is very, very, pertinent here to look at how should India look at that increasing bonhomie and showcasing of that bonhomie between President Putin and President Xi Jinping. Putin now has his 5th term. That means this equation is not likely to change very quickly. He's got another 6 years term now. President Xi Jinping is in early part of his 3rd term. So, if that proximity is continuously growing and West is creating no conditions where there is going to be any disincentives for these two leaders to work together or sort of not work together, I think that is a matter of concern, not just for Western nations, it's a matter of concern for New Delhi as well. How do we manage to continue to sustain that balance in engaging President Putin and, of course, engaging President Xi Jinping is something that our media and, of course, diplomatic experts would be looking at. But I think definitely it's a matter of concern for New Delhi to look at very carefully how to manage its relationship with both Russia and China. And very quick point to close my initial remarks is this is also the year when Russia holds the presidency of BRICS nations, which are now 10 nations from 5 to 10 now. That provides President Putin another platform, which is where India can step in. India will be part and parcel of dozens and dozens of meetings happening under that auspices of BRICS nations, which is where I think India have to play very carefully all its cards that it has to at least keep in know of what is happening between China and Russia and how it can influence that kind of equation, not really becoming sort of antithetical to India's interests in that sense. So definitely, I'm sure India is looking at this meeting very carefully. The joint statement is being read, I'm sure, word by word here, what it means in terms of not just talking about mutual issues of trade, security, energy, but they're also strongly standing with each other. China for Ukraine and Russia for Taiwan. They are together talking of Middle East. I heard Ambassador Gupta say that Russia has friends in Middle East. They have friends in Africa. So, in that sense, whether President Putin is really becoming more and more pariah state, and whether in that sense it is becoming more and more a junior partner of China, despite celebrating that sentiment, is something that I think we have to look very carefully in New Delhi.
Very interesting indeed. Your perspective. Very keen to play a peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine, but I don't think those overtures are welcome either by Ukraine or the West. But fact of the matter is that India is genuinely seen as a country that can play a constructive role in brokering peace. So I'm going to ask you this question. Next month, when that peace summit takes place in Switzerland, do you believe the Prime Minister of India should represent the country at that summit, or do we risk alienating Putin by doing so?
Let me begin by saying, Neha, that if I look at the larger picture of India's foreign policy focus, where India's foreign policy has gradually moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment. For example, India is very friendly with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, countries that don't see eye to eye with each other. Should give me a kind of a hope that if India is invited, India is very likely to join in that peace summit in Switzerland. And now, what kind of invitation comes will also determine what kind of participation India will think of in whether it will be Prime Minister or it will be some official level participation or even non-official participation. There are all ways how you can have retired ambassadors or other people joining in some events. So I think in principle it is likely to me. Also, let me say that most major powers today are witnessing a transition in their foreign policy, and not just India's transition from non-alignment to multi-alignment. Most foreign policies of major powers are becoming increasingly de-ideologized.
Right.
They are becoming increasingly transactional.
Yes.
So in that sense, India is sitting in BRICS, but also India is sitting in quadrilateral security framework, fundamentally trying to ensure it is able to pursue India's national interest. And India's national interest today is number one, to make sure on this rising economic growth rate trajectory, India is able to really hit upon becoming the third largest economy by 2030, the earliest, or maybe a little later. So looking at India's national interest, I think India would be definitely thinking of joining that summit meeting. As far as efficacy of India in terms of playing that role of peacemaker between Ukraine and Russia, I agree with you that I think India is one of those unique countries which have been so far able to maneuver or let's say keep a certain equibalence between engaging Ukraine and engaging Russia. And the fact that we could bring out 24,000 people out of Ukraine
Yes.
is evidence that definitely
And
India
let's
had
not
very good
forget
position.
that, the Ukrainian foreign minister was here just last month and he said,
Yes.
yes, we want India to play a constructive role at next month's peace summit. And the Indian Prime Minister is one of the few world leaders who can pick up the phone and talk to Vladimir Putin and can do the same with President Zelensky.